When basketball legend Michael Jordan learned about the Patel family losing everything in a devastating house fire, no one expected what would happen next. After discovering that 12-year-old Zara's prized possession, a basketball signed by Jordan himself, was one of the few items saved from the flames. The NBA superstar stepped in to help in ways that no one could have imagined. But the real surprise? The hidden message on that basketball revealed a connection between Jordan and Zara's grandfather that would change the family's life forever. Zara Patel woke up coughing. Something wasn't right. Her bedroom was foggy and her throat hurt. She sat up in bed and rubbed her eyes. "That's weird," she whispered. She smelled something burning, like when Dad burned toast, but stronger, much stronger. Zara slipped out of bed. The floor felt warm under her bare feet. She opened her bedroom door and gasped. Thick gray smoke filled the hallway. Down the hall, she could see orange light flickering. From the living room, her heart started racing. "Mom! Dad!" she screamed. "Fire! Wake up!" From the room next to hers, she heard her 6-year-old brother Elijah coughing. "Elijah!" Zara pushed through the smoke toward his room. She covered her mouth with her pajama sleeve. Her parents' bedroom door burst open. Dad rushed out in his pajamas. "Zara, get back in your room!" he yelled. "Amara, call 911. Mom appeared behind him, phone already in hand, her voice shaking as she spoke to the emergency operator. "Our house is on fire. 1427 Maple Street." Dad ran to Elijah's room. "I'll get your brother. Zara, grab your shoes and coat and go out the back door." The smoke was getting thicker. It stung Zara's eyes and made it hard to breathe. She ducked back into her room. Her coat was hanging on the door. She grabbed it and slipped her feet into the sneakers by her bed. Then she froze. On her shelf sat her most precious thing, an old basketball with a faded signature. It had belonged to her grandfather. Michael Jordan himself had signed it years ago. "I can't leave it," she whispered. She grabbed the basketball and hugged it tight against her chest. The smoke was getting worse. The house creaked and groaned. Something crashed in the living room. Zara ran back into the hallway. Dad was carrying Elijah, who was crying and holding his stuffed dinosaur. "Go, go!" Dad shouted. "Out the back door! Now!" They rushed down the smoky hallway to the kitchen. Mom was holding the back door open, waving frantically. "Hurry!" Mom cried. They burst out into the cold night air. Zara gulped fresh air into her lungs. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted. Mom counted heads, her face pale with fear. "Everyone's here? Rohan? Kids?" "We're all out," Dad said, putting Elijah down. "Stay here. I'm going to make sure the neighbors are awake." "No!" Mom grabbed his arm. "Don't go back in." Not in the house, just to warn the neighbors. In the distance, Zara heard sirens wailing. They were getting louder. Dad ran to the house next door and pounded on their door. Lights came on inside. From the other side, Mr. Wilson appeared in his bathrobe. Soon all the neighbors were outside in their pajamas, watching in horror. Zara stood in the damp grass, shivering. The basketball felt cold against her chest. She watched flames leap from the living room windows. The pretty curtains Mom had made were on fire. The couch where they watched movies was burning. The wall with all their family photos was disappearing in the flames. Elijah hugged her leg, crying softly. "Is Snowball inside?" he asked, worried about his white hamster. Zara's stomach dropped. They'd forgotten Snowball. She looked at the burning house. There was no way to go back in. "I think Snowball got out," she lied, patting Elijah's head. "He's smart, remember?" 3 fire trucks roared up to their house. Firefighters jumped out, unrolling long hoses. They shouted to each other as they connected the hoses to fire hydrants. "Stand back, folks!" one firefighter called, waving the family further away from the house. They moved to the sidewalk. Mom wrapped her arms around Zara and Elijah. Dad stood, close, his arm around Mom's shoulders. They huddled together in the cold, watching their home burn. Powerful streams of water arced into the flames. Steam and smoke billowed into the night sky. The firefighters worked quickly, some going inside with masks and tanks on their backs. Mrs. Wilson from next door came over with blankets. "Here," she said kindly, wrapping one around Zara's shoulders. "You must be freezing." Zara hadn't noticed how cold she was until the warm blanket was around her. Her teeth were chattering. She was still holding the basketball so tightly her fingers hurt. "You saved your basketball?" Mrs. Wilson asked. Zara nodded. "It was Grandpa Henry's. Michael Jordan signed it." "Well, I'm glad you got out with something special." A firefighter approached them. His face was streaked with soot. "Is everyone accounted for? Any pets inside?" Dad spoke up. "There's a hamster in a cage in my son's room." The firefighter nodded. "We'll look, but I need to be honest. The fire started in the living room and spread quickly. The interior is severely damaged." Elijah started crying harder. Mom knelt down and hugged him. "Hey, buddy," she said gently. "The important thing is, we're all safe. Things can be replaced. You and Zara and Daddy can't be." But Zara saw the worry in Mom's eyes. Where would they go? What would they do? All their clothes, their photos, Mom's, special jewelry from Grandma, Dad's tools, her school projects, Elijah's toys. Everything was burning. An ambulance arrived. Paramedics checked each family member. They put an oxygen mask on Elijah, who had breathed in more smoke than the others. His dinosaur sat on his lap as he breathed the clean oxygen. "Your vitals are good," a paramedic told Zara, "but we should take you all to the hospital for observation. Smoke inhalation can be tricky." As the sky began to lighten with dawn, the firefighters finally put out the last flames. The house was still standing, but with huge holes in the roof and walls. Water dripped from everything. The smell of smoke and burned plastic filled the air. A firefighter approached, holding something small and wet in his gloved hands. "Look who I found hiding in his exercise wheel," he said with a smile, showing them Snowball the hamster, scared but alive. Elijah's face lit up. "Snowball!" he cried. The firefighter gently placed the shivering hamster in Elijah's hands. As they climbed into the ambulance, Zara looked back at their ruined house one last time. Everything they owned was gone. Everything except a wet hamster, a stuffed dinosaur, and her grandfather's signed basketball. The basketball that would change everything, though Zara didn't know it yet. The Sunshine Motel wasn't very sunny. Room 1-18 had faded yellow wallpaper and 2 beds with scratchy blankets. A small TV sat on a wobbly dresser. The bathroom light flickered when you turned it on. This was home now. Zara placed her grandfather's basketball carefully on the dresser. It was the only decoration in the room. 4 people and 1 hamster lived here now, with nothing but donated clothes and toiletries from the Red Cross. "It's just temporary," Dad said that first morning, trying to sound cheerful. "The insurance will help us rebuild." But then came the phone calls. Zara watched Dad's face get darker with each one. He paced outside the motel room, talking in a low, angry voice. "What do you mean it's not covered? We've paid our premiums for 7 years." Mom sat on one of the beds, making lists in a notebook. someone had given her. Food, clothes, school supplies, medicine. She kept crossing things out and rewriting them. Elijah didn't understand. "When are we going home?" he asked at least 10 times a day. "Our home needs fixing, buddy," Mom would answer. "It'll take time." After 3 days at the motel, Mom drove them to school in a rental car. She had found some donated clothes for them, but nothing fit quite right. Zara's jeans were too short, and Elijah's shirt had a cartoon character he didn't like. "Everyone's going to stare," Zara said, looking down at her outfit. "Just tell them what happened," Mom said. "Your friends will understand." But the kids at their school didn't really understand. They asked nosy questions. "Did you lose all your stuff? Where are you living? Does your house smell like barbecue now?" Ms. Peterson, her teacher, was nicer. She gave Zara a new backpack with notebooks and pencils inside. But still, Zara had to wear the same 3 outfits over and over again. By Thursday, she heard Madison Miller whisper, "She's wearing the same jeans again." After school, Mom picked them up with red eyes. She'd been crying. "Mom, what's wrong?" Zara asked as they drove back to the motel. "Nothing, honey. Just tired." But that night, Zara woke up to hear her parents talking in the bathroom with the water running so the kids wouldn't hear. "The insurance is only covering about half of what we need," Dad whispered. "The fire investigator says it was the old wiring, and there's some clause about electrical systems needing updates." "What are we going to do, Rohan?" Mom's voice shook. "We can't stay in this motel forever. The emergency assistance runs out next week. I'll pick up extra shifts," Dad said. "You're already working 60 hours a week." Zara pulled the scratchy blanket over her head, trying not to cry. Next to her, Elijah slept with Snowball's cage on the nightstand beside him. The next day after school, Zara took her basketball to the small court behind the motel. Bouncing the ball helped her think. She was careful with it, never using it in actual games. But just dribbling and shooting made her feel better. She pretended she was playing in a big arena. The crowd cheered as she made a perfect shot. "Nice form." Zara turned to see a man with gray hair watching her. He wore a blue jacket that said Community Center on it. "Thanks," she said, holding the ball close. "I'm Coach Bennett from the rec center down the street. You've got talent. We have free youth programs if you're interested." Zara shrugged. Maybe. She wasn't in the mood to talk to strangers, even nice ones. "That's a special ball you've got there," Coach Bennett said, nodding at the basketball. "I can tell you're taking good care of it." Zara looked down at the faded signature on the ball. "It was my grandpa's. Michael Jordan signed it." "Coach." Bennett raised his eyebrows. "No kidding. That's something. You know, we have a youth tournament coming up. You should join us." He handed her a flyer, then waved goodbye. Zara put the flyer in her pocket without really looking at it. Back in the motel room, Dad had news. "I found us an apartment," he said. "It's small, and it's not in our old neighborhood, but we can move in next week." "Is it near my school?" Zara asked. Dad and Mom exchanged looks. "Not exactly," Mom said slowly. "You might need to change schools." Zara felt like she'd been punched. "But all my friends are there, and basketball tryouts are next month." "I'm sorry, Zara," Dad said. "We have to go where we can afford." That night, Zara lay awake long after everyone else was asleep. She looked at her basketball on the dresser, the only familiar thing in this strange place. "Help us, Grandpa," she whispered. "We need a miracle." She didn't know then that the miracle was already in motion, all because of that old basketball, and a signature that was about to open doors no one could have imagined. The community center was bigger than Zara expected. Kids of all ages ran around the gym, basketballs bouncing everywhere. Coach Bennett spotted her standing in the doorway and waved her over. "Zara, you made it," he said, smiling. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Zara shifted from foot to foot. Mom had dropped her off on the way to work, glad to have one less child in the cramped motel room for a few hours. "I like basketball," Zara said, simply. She clutched her grandfather's signed ball tightly. Coach Bennett nodded at the ball. "You brought your special one, huh?" "I don't let it out of my sight," Zara explained. "Not since the fire." A look of understanding crossed the coach's face. "The fire? Was your family the one on Maple Street last week?" Zara nodded. News traveled fast in their town. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said. "Basketball can be good medicine when life gets tough. It was for me when I was your age." He showed her around the center. There was a gym, a game room, and a small cafeteria that served free snacks. Kids from all over town came here after school. "We have practice every Tuesday and Thursday," Coach explained. "Games are on Saturdays. No cost to join." For the first time in days, Zara felt excited about something. "Can I start today?" "Absolutely. But, he pointed to her grandfather's ball. "You might want to keep that one safe. We have plenty of practice balls." Zara looked around and spotted some cubbies near the wall. She carefully placed her ball in an empty one, but kept glancing at it during practice. Coach Bennett was a good teacher. He showed Zara how to improve her dribbling and shooting form. By the end of practice, she'd made friends with two girls on the team, Destiny and Kira. "You're really good," Destiny said as they took a water break. "Have you played before?" "Just at school and with my dad," Zara replied. "We used to practice in our driveway, but..." "But what?" Kira asked. "We don't have a driveway anymore. Our house burned down last week." Both girls went quiet. "That's terrible," Destiny finally said. "Where are you living?" Kira asked. "The Sunshine Motel. But we're moving to an apartment soon." After practice, Coach Bennett asked Zara to stay behind. He sat on the bleachers and motioned for her to join him. "You've got natural talent," he said. "With practice, you could be really special." Zara smiled, pleased with the compliment. "That ball of yours," Coach continued, nodding toward the cubby. "You mentioned it was signed by Michael Jordan. How'd your grandfather get it?" Zara's face lit up. This was a story she loved telling. Grandpa Henry worked at Chicago Stadium as a janitor during the Bulls' championship years. He cleaned the locker rooms and hallways. "No kidding," Coach said, looking impressed. Every night, he'd stay late to make sure everything was perfect. One night, he was mopping the hallway when Michael Jordan came back to get something he'd forgotten after a game. Zara walked to the cubby and retrieved her ball, running her fingers over the faded signature. Grandpa said Mr. Jordan asked why he was working so late. Grandpa told him, "Excellence doesn't clock out early." Mr. Jordan laughed and said he felt the same way about basketball. Coach Bennett smiled. "Smart man, your grandfather." The next day, Mr. Jordan brought this ball and signed it for Grandpa. It was his most special possession. Before Grandpa died, he gave it to me because I loved basketball so much. Coach Bennett was quiet for a moment. "That's a beautiful story. Zara, your grandfather sounds like he was a wonderful man." "He was." Zara hugged the ball closer. "This is all I have left of him now. All I have left of anything, really." On the drive back to the motel, Zara told Mom about practice. For the first time since the fire, she felt almost normal. But the feeling didn't last long. When they arrived at the motel, Dad was sitting on the curb outside their room, his head in his hands. "Rohan? What's wrong?" Mom rushed to his side. Dad looked up, his eyes red. "I got fired today." "What? Why?" Mom gasped. "Too many days missed after the fire. They said they needed someone reliable." Mom sat beside him, speechless. "But you were dealing with the insurance and finding us a place to live," Zara protested. Dad gave a tired smile. "I know, kiddo, but that's not how they see it." Inside the motel room, Elijah was watching cartoons, unaware of this new disaster. Snowball ran on his wheel, making a squeaky sound that usually annoyed Zara. Today, she found it comforting. At least some things stayed the same. That night, Zara lay awake again, listening to her parents whisper about money, jobs, and school districts. The apartment they'd planned to rent was now out of reach. She held her basketball close, tracing the signature with her finger. "We really need that miracle now, Grandpa," she whispered. Miles away, Coach Bennett sat at his computer, typing an Au Fanadates email to an old friend from his days working in professional basketball. The subject line read, "A special kid with a Michael Jordan connection. You won't believe this story." The basketball miracle was picking up speed, rolling toward the Patel family like a perfect full-court pass. But for now, life kept getting harder. "Zara, I need you to watch Elijah after school," Mom said one morning as she hurriedly put on her nurse's aide uniform. She had bags under her eyes from working double shifts. "But I have basketball practice," Zara protested. "I'm sorry. Honey, I picked up extra hours at the hospital, and Dad has job interviews all afternoon." Zara's shoulders slumped. She'd been looking forward to practice all week. Coach Bennett was teaching them new drills, and she was finally making friends with Destiny and Kira. "Can't Mrs. Wilson watch him?" She offered to help, Zara suggested, mentioning their former neighbor. Mom shook her head. "She lives too far from the motel. We can't ask her to drive all the way here." "It's not fair," Zara mumbled. "I know it's not fair," Mom said, her voice cracking. "None of this is fair, but we have to stick together right now." Zara felt guilty for complaining. Mom was working 12-hour shifts. Dad was applying for jobs every day. Even little Elijah was being brave about living in the motel. "I'll text Coach that I can't make it," Zara said. Mom gave her a quick hug. "Thank you. There's mac and cheese cups in the mini fridge for dinner. Just add hot water from the bathroom sink." At school, Zara had trouble focusing. Her math teacher, Mr. Garcia, called on her twice when she wasn't paying attention. "Earth to Zara," he said. "Can you tell us the answer to problem 6? The class snickered. Zara looked down at her blank paper. "Sorry, I don't know," she admitted. After class, Mr. Garcia asked her to stay back. "Is everything okay, Zara? You're usually one of my best students." Zara considered lying, but then decided to tell the truth. "We lost our house in a fire 2 weeks ago. Now we're living in a motel, and my dad lost his job, and everything's messed up." Mr. Garcia's face softened. "I'm so sorry to hear that. Would it help to have some extra time on assignments?" Zara nodded gratefully. After school, she texted Coach Bennett that she had to watch her brother. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a message, "Family comes first. See you next time." Walking back to the motel with Elijah, Zara tried to stay positive. "Want to play I Spy?" "No," Elijah said, kicking a rock. "I want to go home. Our real home." "Me too, buddy." At the motel, Zara helped Elijah with his kindergarten homework, then let him watch cartoons while she tried to focus on her own math problems. It was hard to concentrate with the TV on and people walking past their door talking loudly. Around 6 p.m., Dad came back looking worn out. "How did the interviews go?" Zara asked hopefully. Dad attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. They went fine. We'll see. That wasn't a good sign. When interviews went really well, Dad would be excited and talk about the job all evening. Zara made mac and cheese cups for dinner. They sat on the beds to eat since the motel room didn't have a table. It tastes funny, Elijah complained. It's the same as always, Zara said, though she knew he was right. Everything tasted strange in the motel. The water had a chlorine flavor, and they could only use the microwave to cook. After dinner, Dad helped them with homework while trying to make phone calls about insurance. His voice got louder with each call. "We've submitted those forms twice already," he said into the phone. "How many times do you need the same information?" When Mom came home at 10 p.m., she looked exhausted. She sat on the bed and took off her shoes, wincing as she rubbed her feet. "There's mac and cheese left," Zara offered. "I'm too tired to eat," Mom said. "I just need sleep." But even after the lights were out, Zara could tell her parents weren't sleeping. They whispered to each other, thinking the kids couldn't hear. "We've got enough for one more week at this motel," Dad said. "After that, I don't know what we'll do." "What about your sister in Ohio?" Mom asked. "She said we could stay with them until we get back on our feet." "Move to Ohio?" Dad sounded defeated. "Leave our jobs, the kids' school, everything we know?" "What choice do we have, Rohan? We can't live in a motel forever." Zara squeezed her eyes shut, trying not to cry. Move to Ohio? Leave her team and Coach Bennett and her new friends? Leave the town where she'd lived her whole life? The next morning, Zara woke up early and took her basketball outside to the small parking lot. No one was around, so she practiced dribbling between the parked cars. The familiar rhythm helped her think. They couldn't move to Ohio. They just couldn't. There had to be another way. At school, Destiny asked why she'd missed practice. "I had to watch my brother," Zara explained. "My mom's working double shifts now." "That's rough," Destiny said. "My aunt went through something like that last year. They lived with us for a while." "We might have to move to Ohio to live with my aunt," Zara admitted. "Ohio? But you just joined?" "The team!" Zara shrugged, trying to act like it wasn't a big deal. "We don't have many options." That evening, a new disaster struck. When they returned to the motel room, they found the door slightly open. "Stay back," Dad warned, pushing the kids behind him. He cautiously pushed the door open. The room was a mess. Someone had gone through their few belongings. Mom's work laptop was gone. So was the envelope where they kept their emergency cash. "No, no, no," Mom said, hands covering her mouth. They called the police, who came and took a report. But the officer wasn't hopeful. "Motels like this have break-ins all the time," he explained. "Without security cameras, it's hard to catch anyone." Zara frantically looked around the room. "My basketball! Where's my basketball?" She spotted it still sitting on the high shelf where she'd left it that morning. The thief hadn't taken it. Maybe they didn't think an old basketball was worth anything. Or maybe they couldn't reach the shelf. That night, none of them slept well. Every noise in the parking lot made them jump. Dad pushed a chair against the door, though they all knew it wouldn't stop someone determined to get in. In the darkness, Zara held her basketball close. It was more than just a ball with a signature now. It was the only thing that made her feel safe. The only thing that connected her to her old life, her grandfather, and the home they'd lost. She didn't know that across town, Coach Bennett was on the phone with someone important. Someone who remembered a hard-working janitor from Chicago Stadium who always stayed late to make sure everything was perfect. Someone whose signature was fading on Zara's treasured basketball. The next afternoon, Mom's phone rang while she was getting ready for work. Zara was helping Elijah with a puzzle on the motel room floor. "Hello?" Mom answered, pinning her nurse's badge to her uniform. Her face changed from tired to surprised. Yes, this is Amara Patel. She listened for a moment, glancing at Zara. A basketball clinic? For Zara? Mom frowned. I'm afraid we can't afford any extra activities right now. Zara looked up, curious about the conversation. It's free? Mom asked, sounding suspicious. Who did you say you were again? After a few more minutes, Mom hung up. She looked puzzled. That was Coach Bennett from the community center, she told Zara. He says there's a special basketball clinic tomorrow afternoon. He specifically requested that you attend. Zara perked up. Can I go? Mom sighed. It's free, and your dad has the car tomorrow for interviews. I don't know how we'd get you there. I could take the bus, Zara suggested eagerly. Absolutely not, Mom said. You're 12. Coach Bennett offered to pick you up, Mom added reluctantly. He said it's really important that you come. Please, Mom, Zara begged. I haven't done anything fun since the fire. That comment hit Mom hard. Zara could see it in her eyes. I'll call Coach Bennett back, Mom said finally. If he can drive you both ways, you can go. The next day, Coach Bennett picked Zara up at exactly 3:30. She brought her grandfather's basketball, carefully wrapped in a pillowcase to protect it. Thanks for coming, Zara, Coach said as they drove. This is a special opportunity. What kind of clinic is it? Zara asked. Coach smiled mysteriously. Let's just say someone important wanted to meet some promising young players. The community center parking lot was emptier than usual. Coach led Zara inside to the gym, where only 6 kids were gathered, including Destiny. Zara! Destiny waved excitedly. Can you believe we got picked for this? Before Zara could answer, Coach Bennett blew his whistle. Listen up, everyone. We have a special guest instructor today. He asked to remain low-key, so no pictures or social media. Understood? The kids nodded, buzzing with curiosity. A tall man walked into the gym wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low. He had on plain gray workout clothes with no logos or team names. This is Coach Mike, Coach Bennett announced. He'll be working with you today on shooting techniques. Hey, kids, the man said with a deep voice. Let's see what you've got. Coach Bennett divided them into pairs. Zara was matched with Coach Mike, while the others worked with each other. Show me your shooting form, Coach Mike instructed Zara. She dribbled a practice ball and took a shot. It bounced off the rim. Not bad, Coach Mike said. But you're not using your legs enough. Basketball's about your whole body, not just your arms. He demonstrated a perfect shooting motion. Something about the way he moved seemed familiar to Zara, but she couldn't place it. For the next hour, Coach Mike worked with each kid individually. He was patient but demanding, making them repeat shots until they got the technique right. When they took a water break, he spotted Zara's wrapped basketball sitting on the bleachers. "What's that you brought?" he asked, nodding toward it. "My special basketball," Zara said. "I don't play with it, but I bring it everywhere. Mind if I see it?" Hesitantly, Zara unwrapped the pillowcase. Coach Mike gently took the ball, turning it in his large hands. He studied the faded signature without expression. "This is important to you?" he asked. Zara nodded. "It was my grandfather's. He got it when he worked at Chicago Stadium. It's signed by Michael Jordan." "So I see," Coach Mike said quietly. "And it survived the fire I heard about?" Zara looked up, surprised he knew about that. "It's one of the only things that did. We lost everything else." Coach Mike's expression was hard to read behind his sunglasses, but he seemed to be studying her carefully. "Tell me about your grandfather." Zara smiled, always happy to talk about Grandpa Henry. "He worked really hard. He was a janitor. but he took pride in doing his job perfectly. He always said excellence doesn't have a job title. Coach Mike nodded slowly. Smart man. And how's your family doing now, after the fire? Normally, Zara wouldn't share personal stuff with a stranger, but something about Coach Mike made her feel safe. Not good, she admitted. We're living in a motel. Dad lost his job. Our room got robbed yesterday. Mom's talking about moving to Ohio to live with relatives. Ohio? Coach Mike repeated. You don't sound excited about that. I'd have to leave my school and my team and Coach Bennett, Zara explained. And this town is where all our memories are, even if our house is gone. Coach Mike handed the basketball back carefully. Thanks for sharing that with me, Zara, and thanks for taking such good care of this ball. At the end of the clinic, Coach Mike shook hands with each kid. When he reached Zara, he held her hand a moment longer. Keep working on that shooting form and take care of that basketball. On the drive back to the motel, Zara couldn't stop thinking about Coach Mike. There was something special about him. He seemed to really care about my basketball, she told Coach Bennett. Coach smiled. Some people understand that objects can hold powerful memories. When they reached the motel, Coach Bennett seemed to be thinking hard about something. Zara, would it be okay if I talked to a reporter friend about your family's story? Sometimes community awareness can help families in tough situations. I guess so, Zara shrugged. But I don't think a newspaper story will fix our problems. You'd be surprised, Coach said. What can happen when the right people hear your story? As Zara walked into the motel room, she didn't know that the miracle had just moved one giant step closer. 2 days later, Mom got another unexpected phone call. A news interview? She repeated, looking confused. About the fire? Zara was helping. Elijah built a tower with the few blocks a church donation had provided. She looked up, curious. I don't understand why you'd want to interview us specifically, Mom continued. There have been other house fires. She listened for a moment, then glanced at Zara with a strange expression. Yes, my daughter does play basketball, and yes, she has a signed Michael Jordan ball that survived the fire. Now Dad was paying attention too. Tomorrow afternoon? Mom checked her work schedule on the small desk. I suppose we could do that. We'll all be here. After hanging up, Mom looked bewildered. That was Channel 8 News. They want to do a story about fire safety and community support for fire victims. Somehow, they heard about our situation. That's weird, Dad said. Why us? The reporter said something about a unique angle with Zara's. Basketball. Coach Bennett must have told them. Zara thought about Coach Mike, the mysterious instructor who had been so interested in her basketball and her grandfather. Had he said something to the news people too? The next day, a small news van pulled up outside their motel room. A woman with a bright smile and perfect hair introduced herself as Lisa Chen from Channel 8 News. Behind her, a man carried a large camera on his shoulder. Thank you so much for letting us interview you, Lisa said. We're doing a special segment on fire safety and community resilience. The motel room was too small and dark for filming, so they set up chairs outside in a small grassy area. Lisa asked questions about the night of the fire, how they escaped, and what life had been like since then. It's been hard, Dad admitted. Losing our home was devastating. Then I lost my job because of time missed dealing with the aftermath. We're just taking it day by day, Mom added. The community has been kind with donations, but starting over from zero is overwhelming. Lisa nodded sympathetically before turning to Zara. I understand you managed to save something special from the fire? Zara nodded and carefully unwrapped her basketball. This belonged to my grandfather. Michael Jordan signed it for him when Grandpa worked at Chicago Stadium. Lisa seemed very interested in the basketball, asking questions about how Zara's grandfather got it and what it meant to her. Grandpa always said Mr. Jordan was kind to everyone, not just the important people, Zara explained. That's why he respected him so much. The camera zoomed in on the faded signature. After the interview, Lisa thanked them and handed Dad her business card. The segment should air tomorrow evening at 6, she said. We'll focus on fire safety, but your family's story will help put a human face on it. As the news van drove away, Elijah tugged on Dad's sleeve. Are we going to be on TV? Will my friends see me? Dad smiled, the first real smile Zara had seen in days. Yes, buddy. You'll be famous for a day. That evening, something unexpected happened. Dad's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. Hello? He answered cautiously. His eyes widened. Yes, this is Rohan Patel. An interview? Tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Yes, I can make that. Thank you very much. He hung up, looking stunned. That was Westside Electronics, he told Mom. They want me to come in for a job interview tomorrow. It's for a manager position. Better than my old job. That's wonderful, Mom hugged him. But how did they know to call you? The hiring manager saw our interview being filmed today. She recognized me because we used to shop at their store. She said she was impressed by how we're handling our situation. For the first time in weeks, there was hope in Dad's voice. The next evening, they gathered around the small motel TV to watch their interview. It was strange seeing themselves on screen. The segment began with fire safety tips, then transitioned to their story. The Patel family lost everything in a house fire 3 weeks ago. Lisa's voice narrated over footage of their burned house. Their story highlights the importance of having an escape plan and community support during tragedy. The camera showed clips of them sitting outside the motel, talking about the night of the fire. Then it focused on Zara and her basketball. 12-year-old Zara managed to save one precious item, a basketball signed by Michael Jordan that once belonged to her grandfather, who worked at Chicago Stadium during the Bulls' championship years. The camera zoomed in on the basketball, making the signature clearly visible. Henry Williams was known for his exceptional work ethic, Lisa continued, surprising Zara with her grandfather's full name, which she hadn't mentioned. He often stayed late to ensure the facilities were perfect for the players and fans. How did they know that? Zara whispered. She hadn't told the reporter those details. The segment ended with an appeal for community support for fire victims and information about fire prevention. You all looked great, Mom said, turning off the TV. They talked about Grandpa like they knew him, Zara said, still confused. Before anyone could respond, Dad's phone rang again. Another job interview, he announced after hanging up. This one's at Hammond Tech, tomorrow afternoon. That's amazing, Mom said. Both are great companies. And I have good news too, Mom added. The hospital called about offering me more regular hours at a slightly better pay rate. Zara couldn't believe how quickly things were changing. Just yesterday, everything had seemed hopeless. That night, she lay in bed thinking about the mysterious Coach Mike, the news interview, and the sudden job opportunities. It seemed like more than just luck. She held her basketball close, tracing the signature with her finger. Is this your doing, Grandpa? She whispered. Or is something else happening? The next morning, their motel phone rang. It was the front desk. There's a delivery for you, the clerk said. Dad went to check and returned with a large bag of takeout food from Vincenzo's, the fanciest Italian restaurant in town. Inside was a note card that read, Strength and Courage, MJ. Who's MJ? Mom asked. unpacking containers of pasta, salad, and breadsticks. Zara's heart skipped. She looked down at her basketball, at the signature she'd traced 1,000 times. Michael Jordan. MJ, could it be? But why would Michael Jordan send them food? Unless… Coach Mike, she whispered, pieces suddenly clicking together in her mind, but she kept the thought to herself, afraid to hope for something so impossible. Little did she know, impossible things were just beginning to happen. 3 days after the news segment aired, things were looking up for the Patel family. Dad had received offers from both companies he'd interviewed with. Mom's new schedule at the hospital meant she could be home more with the kids. The motel manager had even moved them to a slightly larger room at the same price. It was Saturday afternoon. Zara had been to basketball practice at the community center, but Coach Mike hadn't been there. When she asked Coach Bennett about him, he just smiled mysteriously and said, "Coach Mike comes and goes." Zara was helping Elijah with a jigsaw puzzle on the motel room floor when someone knocked on their door. Dad looked up from his laptop where he was comparing job offers. "Are we expecting anyone?" Mom shook her head. "Maybe it's more donations from the church?" Dad went to the door and opened it. Then he froze, his mouth dropping open. "Can I help you?" he managed to say, his voice strange. "Hi there," came a deep voice from outside. "I'm looking for the Patel family. Specifically, I was hoping to talk to Zara." Zara's head snapped up. She recognized that voice. Dad stepped back from the door, looking stunned. "Please, come in, Mr. A tall man ducked through the doorway. It was Coach Mike from the basketball clinic, but without his hat and sunglasses. Now Zara could see his whole face clearly. Her heart nearly stopped. It wasn't just any Coach Mike. It was Michael Jordan, the Michael Jordan. The same face she'd seen on posters and TV, and the old VHS tapes Grandpa used to play. The same person whose signature she'd been carrying around on her basketball. The greatest basketball player of all time was standing in their motel room. Mom dropped the laundry she'd been folding. Elijah looked confused, too young to fully understand who their visitor was. "Mr. Jordan," Dad stammered. "This is unexpected." Michael Jordan smiled. "Please, call me Michael. And I'm sorry for the surprise visit. I would have called ahead, but I wanted to talk to Zara in person." All eyes turned to Zara, who sat frozen on the floor, unable to speak or move. You're… she tried to say, but the words wouldn't come. Michael Jordan knelt down to her level. "And you're Zara. We've met before, but I was wearing a disguise. I was Coach Mike at the basketball clinic." Zara nodded slowly, still unable to believe what was happening. "I thought it might be you," she whispered, "but I didn't think it was possible." "Would it be okay if I sat down and talked with your family for a bit?" he asked. "Of course." Mom rushed to clear off the edge of one bed. "Please sit. I'm sorry about the accommodations." Michael sat on the bed, looking completely at ease despite the cramped motel room. "First, I want to apologize for the secrecy," he said. "When Coach Bennett told me about Zara and her grandfather's basketball, I wanted to meet her myself, but without causing a commotion." "You knew Coach Bennett?" Dad asked. Michael nodded. "He used to work in basketball operations for the Bulls organization years ago. When he heard Zara's story about her grandfather and the signed ball, he reached out to me." Elijah tugged on Mom's sleeve. "Who is that man?" he whispered, not quietly enough. Michael smiled at the boy. "I'm Michael. I play basketball." "I play basketball too," Elijah declared. "Zara's teaching me." "Is she?" "That's great," Michael said warmly. "She has good form. Just needs to use her legs more on her jump shot." Zara felt her face flush with embarrassment and pride. "May I see the basketball?" Michael asked. "The one that survived the fire?" Zara nodded and went to get it from the dresser where she kept it safely wrapped. She handed it to him carefully. Michael turned the ball in his hands, examining the faded signature. "I remember signing this," he said, surprising everyone. "Your grandfather, Henry Williams, right? You remember my grandpa?" Zara couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I do. Tall man, always stayed late, kept the locker room spotless. Had a mustache?" "Yes," Zara exclaimed. "That was him," Michael smiled. "He was one of the few staff who treated me like a normal person during a tough time in my career. He didn't ask for autographs or give me advice. He just did his job with pride and sometimes shared a few kind words." The room fell silent as they absorbed this new information. "I saw your story on the news," Michael continued. "When they mentioned Henry Williams and showed this basketball, it clicked why Coach Bennett's email had seemed familiar. I wanted to see for myself if this was really Henry's granddaughter." "The food delivery," Mom said suddenly. "That was from you? MJ?" Michael nodded. "Just a small gesture. I hope it was okay." "It was the best meal we've had in weeks," Dad said gratefully. "Thank you." "So," Michael said, looking around the motel room, "tell me what happened. The full story." For the next hour, the Patel family shared everything. The night of the fire, the insurance problems, Dad losing his job, the motel room break-in, and their uncertain future. Michael listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions. "You've been through a lot," he said when they finished. "But you've stuck together. That shows character." "We're trying," Mom said, wiping away a tear. "But it's been hard on the kids, especially." "I understand your job situation is improving?" Michael asked Dad. Dad nodded. "Yes, I've received 2 offers since the news segment. I'm starting at Westside. Electronics on Monday." "That's great news," Michael said. He turned to Zara. "And you're keeping up with basketball through all this?" "When I can," Zara said. "I have to miss practice sometimes to watch Elijah when Mom and Dad are working." Michael nodded thoughtfully. He stood up, looking around the small room once more. "I should get going," he said, "but I'd like to help, if you'll let me." The family exchanged glances, not sure what he meant. "That's very kind," Dad said, "but we couldn't accept charity." "Not charity," Michael interrupted gently. "Think of it as repaying a debt. Your father-in-law was kind to me when I needed it. Now, his family needs help." Before leaving, Michael handed Dad a business card. "This is my assistant's number," he explained. "I'd like to see what can be done about your situation. Would it be okay if she contacted you tomorrow?" Dad nodded, still looking dazed. "Of course. Thank you." Michael turned to Zara one last time. "Keep practicing that jump shot. And take good care of that basketball. It means something to both of us now." After he left, the family sat in stunned silence. "Did that really just happen?" Mom finally asked. "Michael Jordan was in our motel room," Dad said, shaking his head in disbelief. "He knew Grandpa," Zara whispered, hugging her basketball close. "He actually remembered him." "Is he a superhero?" Elijah asked seriously. Zara smiled at her little brother. "Kind of. He's the greatest basketball player ever." That night, Zara couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying Michael Jordan sitting on their motel bed, talking about her grandfather like they were old friends. What did he mean about helping them? What could even someone as famous and rich as Michael Jordan do about their situation? She had no idea that by this time tomorrow, Her family's entire world would be turned upside down, in the best possible way. The next morning, Zara woke up early, still wondering if Michael Jordan's visit had been a dream. But the business card on the nightstand proved it had been real. His personal assistant's name and number were printed in elegant black letters. Vanessa Rodriguez, Office of Michael Jordan. Mom and Dad were already awake, whispering by the small coffee maker. "What do you think he meant by helping?" Mom asked. Dad shrugged. "Maybe a signed jersey for Zara? Or tickets to a game? I don't know." "Good morning," Zara said, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. "Morning, sweetheart," Mom smiled. "Did you sleep well?" "Not really. I kept thinking about yesterday." "Us too," Dad admitted. "It's not every day a basketball legend shows up at your door." Elijah was still sleeping, his arm around his stuffed dinosaur. Snowball was running on his wheel, making the only sound in the quiet room. "What time do you think his assistant will call?" Zara asked. Before Dad could answer, his phone rang. He looked at the screen, then at Mom with wide eyes. "It's her," he whispered. "Already," he answered, his voice formal. "Hello, this is Rohan Patel." Zara watched Dad's expression change from nervous to confused. "Yes, we're all available today. A Bulls game tonight?" Dad's eyebrows shot up. "That's very generous, but Chicago is quite far from—" He paused, listening. "Oh, the local exhibition game. I wasn't aware. VIP seats? That's extremely kind." Mom was mouthing, "What is it?" But Dad was too focused on the call to answer. "A car will pick us up? At 5 o'clock? Yes, we can be ready. After the game. I see." When Dad finally hung up, he looked stunned. "That was Ms. Rodriguez," he explained. "Michael Jordan has invited us to attend tonight's exhibition game between the Bulls and the Hornets. VIP seats. A car will pick us up at 5. "For real?" Zara gasped. "We're going to see an actual NBA game?" "Not just see it," Dad said. "Apparently we have courtside seats, and afterward we're supposed to meet with someone from Mr. Jordan's business team." Mom looked worried. "But we don't have anything nice to wear. We can't go to VIP seats in our donation clothes." Ms. Rodriguez said not to worry about that. Just be ready at 5. At precisely 5 o'clock, a sleek black SUV pulled up outside their motel room. A chauffeur in a suit opened the doors for them. "Good evening, Patel family," he said politely. "I'm Carlos. I'll be driving you to the arena tonight." The car was the fanciest thing Zara had ever been in. The seats were soft leather, and there was a mini fridge with juice boxes and water. Elijah pressed every button he could find, making the windows go up and down. "This is crazy," Zara whispered to Mom, who nodded in agreement when they arrived. At the arena, Carlos led them to a private entrance. A young woman with a tablet was waiting for them. "Welcome, Patel family," she greeted them. "I'm Tess, Mr. Jordan's event coordinator. Please follow me." She led them through hallways most fans never got to see. Players were warming up, and staff members bustled about with equipment. "These are your seats," Tess said, showing them to the very front row, right at center court. "We're sitting here?" Elijah squealed. "We can see their faces." "That's right," Tess smiled. "And before the game, you'll get to meet some of the players during warm-ups." True to her word, Tess brought over several players who high-fived Elijah and Zara. One of them even gave Elijah a wristband, which he proudly wore like a bracelet on his small arm. During the game, people kept glancing at them, wondering who these VIP guests might be. Zara had never felt so special. The players were amazing up close, so tall and fast. Elijah cheered for every basket, no matter which team scored. When halftime came, Tess returned with hot dogs, nachos, and sodas for everyone? "This is the best night ever," Zara said, munching on her hot dog. "It's definitely a nice break from everything," Mom agreed, looking more relaxed than she had in weeks. After the game, the Bulls won by 6 points. Tess found them again. "If you'll follow me, Mr. Peterson from Mr. Jordan's business team would like to meet with you." She led them to a private suite upstairs. A middle-aged man in a sharp suit greeted them. "I'm James Peterson, head of special projects for Mr. Jordan," he said, shaking hands with Mom and Dad. "Did you enjoy the game?" "It was amazing," Dad said. "Please thank Mr. Jordan for his generosity." "I certainly will," Mr. Peterson smiled. "Now, I have something for you." He handed Dad a large envelope. "What's this?" Dad asked. "Mr. Jordan asked me to give you this and to request that you visit this address tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. A car will pick you up." Dad opened the envelope and pulled out a set of car keys and a slip of paper with an address written on it. "I don't understand," he said, looking confused. "The keys are for your new car," Mr. Peterson explained. "It's parked at your motel, right now, a Toyota SUV, midnight blue. Mr. Jordan thought it would be helpful for your family to have reliable transportation." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "A car? He bought us a car?" "Yes, Mrs. Patel. And tomorrow, he'd like you to visit that address. That's all I'm permitted to say for now." Zara couldn't believe what she was hearing. A new car? And what was at this mysterious address? On the drive back to the motel, this time with Carlos again, the family was mostly silent, trying to process everything. "Why is he doing all this?" Mom finally asked. "We only just met him yesterday." "He said something about repaying a debt to Grandpa," Zara reminded them. "But this is beyond a debt," Dad said. "A basketball game and a car? It's too much." When they reached the motel, Carlos pointed to a shiny new SUV parked nearby. "That one's yours," he said, handing Dad another set of keys. "The paperwork is in the glove compartment. It's fully registered and insured for 2 years." They stood in the parking lot, staring at their new car long after Carlos drove away. "Can we go for a ride?" Elijah begged. Despite the late hour, Dad agreed. They piled into their new SUV, marveling at the new car's smell and pristine interior. Dad drove them around the block, everyone exclaiming over every feature. "Look at all these buttons," Elijah said from his booster seat. "The seats are heated," Mom discovered. Back at the motel, none of them could sleep. They kept talking about the game, the car, and the mysterious address. "What do you think is going to happen tomorrow?" Zara asked as she finally climbed into bed. "I have no idea," Dad said honestly. "But whatever it is, we'll face it as a family." Zara held her basketball close that night. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered to it. "I think you're still looking out for us somehow." In her dreams, Zara saw Grandpa Henry smiling at her. He was trying to tell her something about the basketball, but she couldn't quite hear him. It was the same dream she'd had several times since the fire. But this time, the dream felt different. Like whatever Grandpa was trying to tell her was about to be revealed. Tomorrow would bring the biggest surprise yet. But first, the news that Michael Jordan had visited a family at the Sunshine Motel spread through town like wildfire. It started with a motel housekeeper who had seen the basketball legend walking to room 118. She'd told her cousin, who worked at the diner, who told the regulars having breakfast. By noon, the story was everywhere. The Patels discovered this when they returned from the basketball game to find 3 messages at the motel front desk. "There's been a bunch of calls for you folks," the night manager said, handing Dad the slips of paper. The first was from Lisa Chen at Channel 8 News, asking for a follow-up interview. The second was from Zara's school principal, checking if the rumors were true. The third was from Mrs. Wilson, their former neighbor. "Apparently everyone knows Michael Jordan visited us," Dad said as they entered their room. "How is that possible?" Mom wondered. "Small town," Dad shrugged. "Big celebrity." The next morning, the phone started ringing at 7 a.m. "Hello?" Mom answered sleepily. Her eyes widened as she listened. "That's very generous, but yes, I understand." "Well, thank you very much." She hung up, looking surprised. "That was Sonny's Bakery. They want to deliver fresh breakfast for us. Apparently, the owner's daughter has cancer, and Michael Jordan visited her in the hospital last year. He said he wants to pay it forward." Before Mom finished speaking, the phone rang again. This time it was King's clothing store, offering new outfits for the whole family. Then Marco's Pizza called, wanting to deliver dinner. Then Zara's basketball coach. Then 3 of Dad's former co-workers. "This is getting crazy," Dad said after the 7th call. "Why is everyone calling us?" A knock on the door revealed Mrs. Wilson, their old neighbor, holding grocery bags. "I brought some essentials," she said, stepping inside. "And I have news. The neighborhood is organizing a fundraiser for you next weekend." "That's not necessary," Dad began, but Mrs. Wilson waved him off. "Everyone wants to help. Michael Jordan visited you. Do you know what that means to this town? It's like we're all connected to something special." More visitors arrived throughout the morning. Zara's teammates brought bags of clothes and school supplies. Mr. Garcia, her math teacher, dropped off new backpacks for both kids. The fire department brought toys for Elijah. By 9:30 a.m., their motel room was overflowing with donations. "We should get ready," Mom reminded them. "The car is coming at 10 to take us to that address." They dressed in some of the new clothes from King's. The store owner had guessed their sizes surprisingly well. Zara wore jeans that actually fit, and a purple sweater that wasn't secondhand. Elijah twirled around in his new dinosaur t-shirt. "I feel like a new person," Mom said, wearing a simple blue dress. At 9:55, the motel phone rang again. Dad answered, then motioned for everyone. "That was the front desk. Our ride is here, but it's not the chauffeur from last night." They stepped outside to find a surprise. Instead of the fancy SUV, Coach Bennett stood beside his station wagon, grinning. "Good morning, Patel family. I'm your driver today." "Coach Bennett?" Zara ran to him. "You're taking us to the address?" "Sure am. Mr. Jordan asked me personally." He opened the car doors. "All aboard." As they drove, Coach Bennett explained how he'd gotten involved. "I've known Michael for years, from my time working for the Bulls. When I heard Zara's story about her grandfather and the signed ball, I had a feeling it might be the same Henry Williams Michael had mentioned to me once." "So you contacted him?" Dad asked. "I sent an email, never expecting a reply. But Michael called me the next day, asking questions about your family's situation." Coach Bennett glanced at Zara in the rearview mirror. "He remembered your grandfather. Very clearly, Zara. Said Henry gave him some important advice during a tough time in his career." "What advice?" Zara asked. "That's not my story to tell," Coach said mysteriously. "Maybe he'll share it with you someday." They drove to a nicer part of town, where the houses were bigger and the lawns greener. Coach Bennett turned onto Oakwood Drive and slowed down. "Almost there," he said. Zara pressed her face to the window. This neighborhood was where the doctors and lawyers lived. What were they doing here? Coach Bennett pulled into the driveway of a beautiful 2-story house with blue shutters and a big front yard. A red for sale sign stood in the grass with a EE sold sticker across it. "We're here," Coach announced. "But whose house is this?" Mom asked, confused. "Let's find out," Coach Bennett said with a smile. "There should be a real estate agent waiting for you." Sure enough, A woman in a business suit stood on the front porch, holding a folder. She waved as they got out of the car. "You must be the Amaze Patel family," she called. "I'm Rebecca Martinez from Hometown Realty. I've been expecting you." The family approached cautiously, still confused. Even Elijah was quiet, sensing something important was happening. "What is this place?" Dad asked. Rebecca smiled. "I've been asked to give you a tour of the property. Shall we begin?" As she led them toward the front door, Zara had a feeling that their lives were about to change forever. Rebecca unlocked the front door and stepped aside. "Please, go in and look around." The family hesitated on the threshold. Dad looked at Mom, who nodded slightly. Together, they stepped inside. The house was beautiful. Sunlight streamed through large windows onto hardwood floors. The living room was twice the size of their motel room, with a stone fireplace and built-in bookshelves. The kitchen had shiny appliances and marble countertops. "This is amazing," Dad said, running his hand along a smooth countertop. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, finished basement, and a large backyard, Rebecca explained, leading them through the house. The previous owners just renovated last year. "Why are we here?" Mom finally asked. "Did Mr. Jordan want us to see how the UG other half-lives?" Rebecca smiled mysteriously. "Let's finish the tour, and then I have something for you." Upstairs, there were 4 bedrooms. The main bedroom had its own bathroom with a tub big enough for 2 people. Another bedroom was painted light green, with space for a desk and bookshelves. "This would be perfect for Zara," Mom said without thinking, then caught herself. "I mean, for someone Zara's age." The smallest bedroom was painted blue with yellow stars on the ceiling. "Dinosaurs would like this room," Elijah declared, clutching his stuffed T-Rex. The 4th bedroom was set up as a home office, with built-in cabinets and a window seat. Back downstairs, Rebecca showed them the backyard. It wasn't huge, but there was a patio, a grassy area, and Zara's heart jumped, a basketball hoop mounted over a small concrete court. "The neighborhood has a community pool 2 blocks away," Rebecca added, "and the elementary school is within walking distance." "It's a lovely home," Dad said carefully, "but I'm still not sure why we're here." Rebecca gestured to the living room. "Sofa. Let's sit down. I have something for you." Once they were seated, Rebecca handed Dad a cream-colored envelope. "This contains information about the property." Dad opened it and pulled out several papers. As he read, his face went from curious to shocked. He passed the papers to Mom, whose eyes widened. "I don't understand," Dad said. "These papers have our names on them." Rebecca nodded. "That's correct. Mr. Jordan has purchased this house and placed it in your family's name." The room went completely silent. Even Elijah, who had been bouncing on the sofa cushions, stopped moving. "That's impossible," Mom whispered. "We just met him 3 days ago." "Mr. Jordan moves quickly when he makes a decision," Rebecca said. "The sale closed yesterday." "But this house must cost—" Dad couldn't even finish the sentence. "All expenses have been covered," Rebecca assured them. "Property taxes for the first 2 years, utilities set up, everything." Zara couldn't believe what she was hearing. A house? Michael Jordan had bought them a house? "There must be some mistake," Dad insisted. "We can't accept something this valuable from someone we barely know." "Mr. Jordan was quite clear about his intentions," Rebecca said. "He believes your family has experienced unnecessary hardship, and he wanted to help you get back on your feet." She reached into her folder and pulled out another envelope. This one was smaller, with Patel family written on it in strong handwriting. "He asked me to give you this once I'd shown you the house." Dad took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a note and a set of keys. Mom read the note aloud. A fresh start. Make new memories here. MJ. These are house keys? Dad asked. Staring at the keys in his palm, Rebecca nodded. The house is fully yours. You can move in immediately if you wish. Elijah broke the stunned silence. We get to live here? For real? It appears so, buddy, Dad said, his voice unsteady. Mom was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how we can ever thank him enough. Rebecca stood up. There's one more thing. After the game last night, you were told to meet with someone from Mr. Jordan's team, correct? They nodded. That meeting was to arrange for you to attend. Another Bulls game next month in Chicago. VIP treatment again. Mr. Jordan would like to speak with you personally then. She handed Dad another envelope. These are your tickets, hotel reservations, and flight information. Everything is taken care of. After Rebecca left, the family sat in their new living room, trying to process what had just happened. Should we accept this? Dad asked Mom. It's too much. How can we not? Mom replied. It's a miracle, Rohan. The miracle we've been praying for. Zara walked around the living room, touching the walls, the fireplace mantel, the windowsills. Was this really their house now? Can I see my room again? Elijah asked, already claiming the blue bedroom with stars. Dad smiled. Go ahead, just don't get too attached until we decide. Dad, Zara interrupted. I think we should accept it. Grandpa would want us to. She held up her basketball. Mr. Jordan said he was repaying a debt to Grandpa. Maybe this is what he meant. Dad looked at Mom, who nodded. All right, he said. Let's go get our things from the motel. We're coming home. Home. The word had never sounded so good. As they walked out to their new car in the driveway of their new house, Zara felt like she was floating in a dream. But the solid weight of the basketball in her arms reminded her that this was wonderfully, incredibly real. What she didn't realize was that the biggest surprise was still waiting to be discovered. The family drove to the motel in a daze. None of them could believe what had just happened. We have a house, Mom kept saying. We have a real house again. At the motel, they quickly packed their few belongings. It didn't take long. Most of what they owned now had come from donations in the past few weeks. Should we tell the manager we're leaving? Zara asked as they loaded their things into their new car. Definitely, Dad said. We paid through the end of the week. Maybe he can give the room to another family who needs it. The motel manager seemed genuinely happy for them when Dad explained the situation. Michael Jordan bought you a house, he repeated, shaking his head in amazement. That's incredible. I'm happy for you folks. You've been through a lot. Thank you for everything, Mom told him. We appreciate how you helped us during this difficult time. As they drove back to their new home, it still felt strange to think of it as theirs. Elijah bounced in his car seat. Can I have dinosaur pictures in my room? He asked. Sure, buddy. Dad smiled. We'll need to get you some furniture first, though. That was a sobering thought. They had a house, but nothing to put in it. We'll figure it out, Mom said, seeing Dad's worried expression. We can get some basics and add things over time. When they pulled into the driveway of their new house, they were surprised to see several cars parked along the street. Coach. Bennett's station wagon was there, along with Mrs. Wilson's sedan and a few vehicles Zara didn't recognize. What's going on? Dad wondered as they got out of the car. The front door opened and Coach Bennett appeared, grinning widely. Welcome. Home, Patels. Come on in. We've got a surprise for you. They followed him inside, where at least 20 people were gathered in the living room. Mrs. Wilson was there, along with several of their old neighbors. Zara spotted her teacher, Mr. Garcia, and some of her teammates from the community center. Lisa Chen from Channel 8 News stood in the corner with a cameraman. "Surprise!" everyone shouted together. Zara's jaw dropped. The living room, which had been empty during their tour, now contained a beautiful sectional sofa, a coffee table, and a large TV mounted on the wall. Through the doorway, she could see a dining table with chairs in the dining room. "What is all this?" Mom asked, her hands covering her mouth. Mrs. Wilson stepped forward. "When word got out about your new house, everyone wanted to help. We've been collecting furniture donations all morning. The whole town has been so inspired by your story," Lisa Chen added, "and by Mr. Jordan's generosity. Come see the rest," Coach Bennett urged, leading them through the house. The kitchen was stocked with dishes, pots, and pans, and even food in the refrigerator. The dining room had a table set for 4, with a vase of fresh flowers in the center. Upstairs, Zara gasped when she saw her bedroom. There was a twin bed with purple bedding, a desk, and a bookshelf already filled with books. On the wall hung a framed Chicago Bulls jersey. "This is mine?" she whispered, touching the soft comforter. "All yours," Coach Bennett confirmed. "The girls from your team picked out the bedding. They remembered purple is your favorite color." Elijah's room was even more amazing. The bed had dinosaur sheets, and dinosaur decals had been placed on the walls. There was a toy box overflowing with new toys, and a small table with dinosaur coloring books and crayons. "Dinosaurs!" Elijah shrieked, running around the room in excitement. Mom and Dad's room had a queen-sized bed, dressers, and lamps. Someone had even put framed family photos on the nightstand. Pictures Mrs. Wilson must have had from before the fire. "I can't believe this," Dad said, his voice choked with emotion. "How did everyone do this so quickly? When Michael Jordan does something for a family in our town, we all want to be part of it," Mrs. Wilson explained. Everyone pitched in what they could. "The furniture store donated the beds and sofa," Coach Bennett added. "The grocery store stocked your kitchen. Teachers from the school brought books and school supplies." Downstairs again, Lisa Chen approached with her cameraman. "Would you mind saying a few words for our evening news?" she asked. "So many people have been following your story." Mom looked at Dad, who nodded. Together, they expressed their gratitude to Michael Jordan, to the community, to everyone who had helped them during this difficult time. "We've gone from having nothing to having everything," Mom said, wiping tears from her eyes. "Not just material things, but the knowledge that we're part of a community that cares." After the interview, people began to leave, hugging the family and promising to check in on them. Mrs. Wilson was the last to go. "Your garbage day is Thursday," she told them with a smile. "And the mail comes around noon. Call me if you need anything at all." Finally, it was just the 4 of them in their new house. "I can't believe this is ours," Mom said, sitting on the sofa. "I'm going to check out the basketball hoop," Zara announced, grabbing her precious basketball. Outside, the small court was perfect, just big enough for dribbling and shooting practice. The hoop was regulation height, with a new net. Zara bounced the ball a few times, feeling the familiar texture against her fingers. She took a shot. The ball swooshes through the net perfectly. "Nice one," came a voice from behind her. Zara turned to see Dad watching from the patio door. "It's perfect, isn't it?" she said. Dad nodded, looking around at the yard, the house, the neighborhood. "Zara, do you know why Michael Jordan would do all this for us?" he asked. "It's so extraordinary." Zara looked down at her basketball, at the faded signature. "He said he was repaying a debt to Grandpa," she reminded him. "But I don't know what Grandpa did that deserved all this," Dad sat on the small bench beside the court, patting the space next to him. Zara joined him. "Your grandfather was a special man," Dad said. "He always said that how you treat people when no one's watching shows your true character." Zara nodded. "I remember. He said that's why he always cleaned the locker room so perfectly, even if no one noticed." "Apparently, someone did notice," Dad said, looking at the house. "Someone who never forgot." That night, the family ate dinner at their new table, sleeping in real beds for the first time in weeks. Zara's room was quiet and private. No sounds of people walking by outside. No Elijah talking in his sleep a few feet away. She placed her basketball carefully on the special stand someone had provided for her shelf. The signature faced outward, faded, but still visible. Michael Jordan's name, written on a ball given to her grandfather years ago. As she drifted off to sleep, Zara had the dream again. Grandpa Henry trying to tell her something about the basketball. But this time, for some reason, she had a feeling she was about to understand what he wanted her to know. The biggest surprise was coming, hidden in plain sight all along. The next morning, Zara woke up in her new bedroom. For a moment, she was confused by the purple walls and the softness of the mattress. Then she remembered this was her room in their new house. She sat up and looked around in the morning light. Everything seemed even more beautiful than it had yesterday. The bookshelf was filled with both old favorites and new titles she'd been wanting to read. The desk had fresh notebooks and colorful pens. Someone had even hung a basketball-themed calendar on the wall. Downstairs, Mom was already in the kitchen, making pancakes on the new stove. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, flipping a perfect golden pancake. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in weeks," Zara admitted. "Where's Dad and Elijah?" Dad's setting up Snowball's cage in the living room, and Elijah is helping by talking non-stop about dinosaurs. Zara laughed. It felt so normal, so much like their life before the fire. After breakfast, the family continued exploring their new home. Every drawer and closet seemed to hold another surprise. Towels in the bathrooms, cleaning supplies under the sink, even clothes in their sizes hanging in the closets. "It's like they thought of everything," Mom marveled, opening a drawer filled with neatly folded t-shirts that looked just Zara's size. In Zara's closet, she found a shoebox with her name written on it. Inside was a brand new pair of basketball shoes, the expensive kind she'd always wanted, but never asked for because she knew they couldn't afford them. "Mom, look at these!" she called excitedly. Mom examined the shoes with wide eyes. "Those must have cost a fortune." "There's a note," Zara said, pulling out a small card. She read aloud, "For your next game, keep shooting. Coach B." That Coach Bennett is something special, Mom said, smiling. Zara decided to organize her room. She arranged her books by size on the shelf and lined up her new school supplies on the desk. Last, she carefully placed her basketball in the display case someone had provided. As she positioned it, something caught her eye. There was writing near the signature. Tiny words she'd never noticed before. "That's weird," she murmured. She peered closer, but the writing was too small to read clearly. She looked around her room and spotted a magnifying glass on her desk among the school supplies. Heart beating faster, Zara grabbed the magnifying glass and held it over the faded writing. Next, to Michael Jordan's signature was a short message. "To Henry, thanks for the advice that changed my career. I won't forget," Zara gasped. "Mom! Dad! Come quick!" Her parents rushed into the room, followed by a curious Elijah. "What's wrong?" Dad asked, alarmed. "Look at this," Zara said, showing them the message through the magnifying glass. Grandpa didn't just get a random signature from Michael Jordan. He gave him important advice. Mom read the message aloud, then looked at Dad in amazement. "All this time, we thought it was just a signature," she said, "but it was a thank you note." "That explains why Mr. Jordan has done so much for us," Dad realized. He wasn't just being charitable. He was honoring a debt to someone who helped him when he needed it. Zara thought about her recurring dream, Grandpa Henry trying to tell her something about the basketball. Now she understood. He'd been trying to show her this message, this connection that was more meaningful than just a famous signature. "Grandpa helped Michael Jordan," she said, the words feeling strange in her mouth. "And now, years later, Michael Jordan helped us when we needed it most." Her family gathered around the basketball, this treasure that had meant so much before, and now meant even more. It wasn't just a memento of her grandfather or a valuable collectible. It was proof that kindness comes back around, sometimes in ways you could never imagine. The circle that had started with her grandfather's simple act of kindness had completed itself in the most extraordinary way. Zara smiled, hearing Grandpa's voice in her memory. Excellence doesn't clock out early. Neither, it seemed, did gratitude. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Where are you listening from? Let us know in the comments below. For another inspiring story that will move you just as much, click the video appearing on your screen right now. Your support helps us bring more heartwarming stories like this one straight to you.